another episode of Countryside Workshop. I'm Jeremy Crawford. Today, I'm going to show you how to make a memory box with epoxy resin inlay and a Mod Podge picture on the bottom panel. Let's go ahead and head to the workbench and let's get going. Alright, so we're going to start out with this character maple, and it's just slightly over 3/4 of an inch. We're going to take it over to the planer. We're going to bring it down to just a little over 1/2 of an inch, and that's going to give us the extra material we need to go ahead and scrape it and sand it to end up with our final thickness of 1/2 an inch. Alright, so here we are with our cut diagram. Right here on the clipboard, and we've got our measuring and marking tools. We're going to go ahead and go over here to the board, and we're going to kind of lay out how we want each individual pieces to look. And just kind of looking at it, I know I'm going to have to stabilize some of these knots and these imperfections, but I'm going to try to put those on the underside, or not the show pieces. And I do know that this real colorful area right over here, I'm going to want to, I'm thinking if I slice it down the middle and put it there, that it might look good for breadboard ends on the top. But I don't know, so let's go ahead and just start marking out and laying out our tools, our parts, and then we will see what we have left over. All right, so we went ahead and marked out our parts here. And I gave myself about 1/4 inch overage on each individual part. So I have right here marked out for my left side, and then I have my front marked out and added another 1/4 inch. Got my right side, and then I have my back. And if you can tell what I did, I have it to where I'll have a continuous grain from the sides to the front to the other side all the way through the back. And that's just visual appealing. And then if you look all the way down here, just like I told you, so I really think this section here is going to be nice for my breadboards. I'm going to cut it down the middle, and I'll slice off some of this just regular white maple off the sides, and kind of center my breadboards just within that character spot right there. And then I left this entire section back here for the top. I don't have enough here to equal the full width of the top. So what I'll do is I have all this extra, this entire length of the board. I will use a section of this, whichever lines up nice with the grain match on that end, and piece it together to make the full width of the top. Again, I left myself at least 1/4 inch overhang on each one to account for blade curve and squaring up the parts and making sure that each one is square. So now that we have our layout marked, let's go ahead and cross cut at least the top and the breadboard ends off, and then we will go ahead and rip this section down at the table saw, and then go ahead and do a rough cross cut, and then we'll tape them together and make sure all the parts are the exact same size. All right, so let's go to the table saw. All right, so we have our parts all cut up here. We're gonna go ahead and come back to the bench, and we're gonna start cutting our joinery. I decided to go with the Festool Domino because it's quick and it's easy. And frankly, I've had it in my shop for a year and I've only used it 2 times. Alright, so I made a mistake when running the domino tenon. As you can see here, it's a little too close
to the face of the board versus this side, this is what it should have looked like, was right down the middle. I don't know what happened because I didn't change the settings. This was the first one, this was the second one, and the other two that turned out after this are correct. So to fix the problem, all I did was glue a tenon in here, and then I'm gonna flush cut it, and all that's gonna do is basically hardwood fill that hole, and then I can recut the tenon. And you'll never see this because this side will be covered up by the front and the back of the case. And there it is, all flush cut. I'll sand it down just a little bit to make sure that there's nothing left there, and then we'll recut our domino tenon. Alright, so I got my layout lines here. Between this line and this line, that's going to be the thickness of my material of the front and the back. And all I did was put a tenon in this side and slide it in and mark the other side of my board, kind of like this right here, and then marked it. And now I'm going to take it over to the router table, install my 1/4 inch straight bit, and now I'll know my layout lines to start and stop my groove for the bottom panel. Alright, because I only had layout lines marked on one piece of wood, I went ahead and did these layout lines, and you saw me do that using the first piece as the guide. So as it went through and it stopped, I marked where that was going to be stopped, and I went all the way through, and I marked on the table here where it was going to be done. So that way when I bring this other piece over that's not marked on the wood, I can drop it in place, back up slightly till I see that line. See that line, I can plunge forward and keep plunging all the way past until I see this other line on this side. And then I know that this groove matches the groove on the other piece. All right, now that we got our grooves cut on both the sides and the front and back panel here, we're gonna go ahead and take a measurement and determine what we need for the bottom panel before we cut it down to size.
Alright, now that we have our bottom panel all cut up to size, it looks pretty good, but I think we can do something to dress it up and make it just a little bit better. So I found this 20-year-old map of my hometown in my truck, and I decided to use that as the bottom panel. We're going to kind of Mod Podge it on. I took my bottom panel and I placed it on the map, kind of figured out where I wanted the map to reside on this bottom panel. And then I cut it just a little bit bigger so I have room to trace it and make sure I get out all the bubbles to make sure it was big enough to cover that bottom panel once I put glue on it. I'm going to adhere it with some all-purpose spray adhesive, and then we'll put a couple top coats of water-based polyurethane on it. I'm not going to show you how to do it. If you want to find out how to do it for yourself, you can head over to thewoodwhisperer.com, and I'll post a link down in the show notes, and then you can see how it's done. Alright, now that we got our bottom panel all complete, we're going to go ahead and take the parts over to the sander. We're going to go ahead and get them pre-sanded, and then we'll come back together and we'll assemble the base and get it all glued up.
Alright, now that we have the box all glued up here, we take it out of the clamps. It's time to start measuring and cutting the parts for the lid. Alright, so I'm going to take 6 measurements total. I'm going to take 3 this way, which I'm getting 7 and 9/16, 7 and 9/16, and 7 and 9/16. And then here, looks like 14, 14, and 14. Alright, we got the top panel all glued up and we got it here in the clamps. It's been here for about an hour, so we're going to go ahead and take it out of the clamps. We're going to cut it down to size, and then we're going to start attaching the breadboard ends. Alright, so here we are with the breadboard ends and the middle panel. Still needs to be flattened, but I'm going to flatten it all at one time. I'm going to adhere the breadboard panels first. And you can see here that I went ahead and marked my tenon placement for my dowels. I'm going to use 3 dowels or dominoes from Festool, and all 3 of these on this side are going to be on the tight setting, and these ones are going to be on the loose setting, and that's just so that this panel can move with the weather changes. I'm also, when I go to glue it, I'm only going to glue this domino and the middle about 2 inches, and that's going to give the tolerance and the allowance for the panel to move. Alright, so we got our panel here with the dominoes pre-glued in. Now we're going to go ahead and attach the breadboards and flush them up with the front. And then we're just going to take one clamp and run it right down the middle here. And I have these beautiful solid brass hinges from Brusso Hardware. They were kind enough to send me all the hardware I'm going to use for the box. So they've sent me some hinges, and they also sent me some feet that I'm going to incorporate. I'll put a link down into the description for Brusso and particularly these hinges. So kind of playing around, I determined I want to do 2 inches. So I'm going to do 2 inches in from this side and 2 inches in from the opposite side. And when I do, all I'm going to take it and I'm going to rotate that hinge back like this, and then I'm going to set it on there till it creates that 90 degrees. I'm going to do 2 inches, and then I'm going to take my marking knife and I'm going to trace around it. And this is just going to give me a spot for my chisel to rest. Now that I have this side marked, so you can see it better, I'll take my pencil and I'll color in that line. And then I'm going to use a chisel and a router plane, and I'm going to use the depth of the hinge here, or the thickness, to set my depth of my router plane. Alright, so we're going to line that up in that knife kerf hole. And now I have it nice and secure. And I can come in from the face side here, and I can pair it. And you're going to see me do a lot of this by hand and not very much with the mallet, because I want to be very precise, because the brass hinge is a set thickness. I can't sand it down or I'll destroy the finish. On the handle or another piece of wood, you can sand it down to make it flush. So here, if I take out too much material, there's no going back. So all I'm doing here is just getting me some nice shoulder lines established on all the sides. That way I can go in with my router plane and clean it out. Now that I have it lined up, I'm just going to take my marking knife, and I'm going to just kind of score right on either side of that hinge on the lid. And that will give me exact placement of that hinge. Alright, so now you can go ahead and see these little score marks that I have right here. And I went ahead and filled them in with a little bit of pencil on both sides, just so you can see them. And then to get that reference again, I go ahead and I fold that hinge, and I'll lay it up here, and then I'll score around it, and then remove the waste exactly like I did on the box. Alright, so now that I got it all mortised out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my hinge and I'm going to place it in there, and I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill and go ahead and pre-thread the holes before I go ahead and sand and ply finish. So what I have here is a 5/64 inch bit, and I'm just going to center it on the hinge here. I'm going to pre-drill, and then I'm going to pull that hinge off, and Brusso Hardware provides this awesome little steel screw. Since I'm using brass hardware, it came with brass screws, but it includes one steel screw for you to go ahead and thread the holes so you don't strip out the head of the screw. And I'm just going to run it all the way down. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this other hole. And that way I'll have them all complete and I won't have to worry about marring up the surface once I sand it and apply finish. Alright, so here we are with all the parts sanded all the way up to 220, and then we went ahead and vacuumed everything clean. And now I'm going to finish everything off with General Finishes Armor Seal. It's my go-to finish. And it's a nice wipe-on finish. I'll just take a blue paper towel or a cotton rag. I dip it into my finish. And then I just lightly put it on there. And my first coat is always going to be a little bit heavier than the rest of the coats because the wood's going to be really thirsty and it's just going to pull in that finish. And I try to take nice even long strokes. But again, on these first coat, maybe the second coat, it's not really going to matter as much because the wood's going to be so thirsty it's just going to suck it up. You're not going to have many streaks on it anyway. And after I apply this first coat, I'll go ahead and I'll let it set for about 12 hours or until it's completely dry, and then I'll run it with a little bit of 220, maybe 320, and depending on if there's very many nibs in it, it feels pretty smooth, I'll even go with just the 600 to kind of level it out and give myself some binding power for the next coat. And I'll just keep on applying this first coat until it really just stops pulling it in. Like I'm already seeing some dry spots. And I'll just keep doing that until those dry spots kind of stop pulling up that finish. Alright, now that we got the finish all dried, I'm going to go ahead and apply my feet. I got these awesome little brass feet here from Brusso Hardware. Again, they provided me all the hardware for this box, and they're pretty cool. I had to go ahead and apply these 4 little spacers made out of mesquite, and that matches the handle on the lid. Granted, these will hardly ever be seen because I've cut them to where they fit just for the feet, and I had to do that because I had this recessed bottom, and I recessed the bottom too far that the feet would never show, and actually the sides would touch before the feet. So I raised them up just to where this side here, this little thickness right here, is even with the sides, and that way the little foot here is what will be touching on the bottom. And they sell both stainless steel and brass hardware, and I chose the brass because this just gives it that little more ship vintage type feel, since it is a military memory box. They provide all the hardware to attach it, stainless steel screw just like the hinges to thread your holes, and then brass screws to put it in. However, my bottom is only a 1/4 inch, and these little spacer blocks are roughly about probably 1/8 of an inch or so, and those screws are easily longer than that, and they would go all the way through the leg, all the way through the spacer and the bottom, and poke through on the other side. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I've scuffed up the bottom of them, and if I had some 5-minute epoxy, I would use that, or if I wanted to, I could put regular epoxy and let it set overnight. But I'm just going to do some medium CA glue on the bottom of each one, and that should be plenty enough to hold it, because this is not a structural piece, it's just going to be sitting on it. This is undeniably a military memory box. You know, with the support, the troops, epoxy resin inlay on the lid, and then we got this cool, awesome little bottom panel. This is a 20-year-old mat from my hometown, and really I kind of took it and positioned it to where what you see is where I spent majority of my time growing up. You know, again, I use these awesome hinges and the bottom feet from Brusso Hardware. Now, I want to thank Brusso Hardware for being so kind to send me the hardware to make this box, just to kind of make it that much better quality. And you know, it's definitely something that I'm going to hold on to for the rest of my life and put a lot of my treasures in here. And I definitely foresee my kids or my grandkids having it 20, 30, 40 years from now. And you know, hopefully they'll put their treasures in here. If y'all have made some kind of memory box, I would be glad to see it. You can post it on my Facebook, my Instagram, or Twitter. Use the hashtag Countryside Workshop, and I will take a look at them. I'll be interested in seeing what you've made. It doesn't have to be a military memory box. It could be anything, from a regular box to something that you're going to use to memorialize somebody or something. If you've enjoyed my video, I hope that you go down and click on the subscribe link right down there. As always, teach people, inspire creators, and learn the craft of woodworking.